our logo right at the top of that page with a question, and then I've prominently displayed the name of our subject as if you do not know. Right, ladies and gents, so this deals with the redemption of preference shares. That is question 4 of your uh, question bank on share capital, right? So what I'm asking here is, first of all, how do you approach a question like this? So it's quite a long question. Maybe I can just scroll down to the question, which I've spruced up as well. So you can see there, it starts with Cocoa Limited was incorporated with an authorized share capital of 2.5 million non-par value ordinary shares and 750,000 10% redeemable preference shares, also of no par value. We discussed the par value issue. In our very first discussion of it. Okay, so how do we approach it, ladies and gentlemen? First of all, and this is always a good idea, I tell you why, perhaps not in the topics we are doing now, but we are doing a specific topic in the last term. It's our last topic of the year, actually, which deals with foreign exchange. So we are importers and we are importing our inventory from another business, but in a different country, right? And you know, it is quite shocking in the one hand, but it's also actually quite funny to see how many students misinterpret those questions, where they think the one company, which is the supplier in the foreign company, we're working in that company's books, but now we're working in the company's books who is actually importing it from that company. And you know, once you've got that wrong, you're starting this whole question on the wrong foot, and then it just becomes, as my old English teacher used to say, a dog's breakfast. Now, I don't know why he picked on a dog's breakfast, but when I still had dogs, they had very good breakfast. But anyway, um, it becomes a bit of a chaos, right? So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, determine the name of the company concerned. In other words, in whose books are you working, right? We've already now seen our company, the company that we are providing this the workings for, is Cocoa Limited, right? Where do we get this information? Just like we've seen now, we've seen this like less than a minute ago. Usually the company's name appears in the first paragraph of the question, right? Usually it also appears in the required section. We'll talk about the required section again a little bit later. And then just explaining why it's important to determine the company's name. Well, it is really comes down to that, you know, in whose books you are working, you know, whose journals you are doing, whose postings you are doing, whose adjustments you are doing, whose financial statements you are drawing up. If you don't know that, well, then you shouldn't be in financial accounting too, should you? Okay. And like I say, it becomes especially important when we get to more intricate kinds of topics and questions where you deal with various entities. It might be 3 or 4 different companies, and then you've got to be pretty darn sure that you are not thinking that you are working in one of the suppliers or one of the customers' books. You are working in your company's books. Okay. So that is just a little explanation there. And then just to continue, secondly, we must determine the financial year end. That is very often very important for a multitude of reasons. We're not even going to go into all of them. We'll just give you the highlights, ladies and gentlemen. The main thing is, when it's a financial year end, we know that we've got to do our year end adjustments. You know that from Financial Accounting 1 already. So we're talking about trial balances, pre-adjustment, post-adjustment, and so on. And then once you've got your final trial balance, then you start drawing up your financial statements. So the whole point of a financial year end is that it determines when you have to draw up financial statements. We all know from Financial Accounting 1, I'm sure Dr. Brever discussed that with you last year, that if it's a listed company, you've got to draw up financial statements more often than just once a year. You may find that the management of your particular company wants monthly statements. So it might be that you have to drop for internal use financial statements every month so that management can see where the company is headed and what's the company's financial health. Does the company have sufficient cash flow and so on? So, ladies and gentlemen, the financial year end is crucial to know. If I can just mention that last topic about foreign exchange, we'll see when we get there. We also have to then go and see if we've got any assets or liabilities that are denominated in a foreign currency, and then we've got to convert them to our reporting currency. So there are all sorts of events and processes that take place before you can draw up your financial statements, right? So you have to know when the year end is, and that you will also normally find probably in the very first paragraph of the question. And when you get to the required section, it will normally also indicate there for the year ended whatever the date is, right? So there are multiple sources of the financial year end in the question, but make sure that you know where that is. And then it might also, especially when it comes to certain types of questions, it might be a good idea to draw a timeline. A timeline is simply to draw a straight line, and on the left hand side you've got the first day of the year, and on the right hand side you've got the last day of the year. And then you carry on with that line after the last day of the year for any event that might take place subsequent to the financial year end, but which relate to this year. That's where accruals come in. You know that from Financial Accounting 1, where you might only receive your telephone bill, for instance, after the year end, but it relates to the last month of the year that you are drawing up the financial statements for, which then means that you have to include it. You have to accrue that expense. You know the old story. You must debit the expense, and then you must credit an expense payable or an accrued expense. Anyway, I don't want to reteach Financial Accounting 1. I'm just emphasizing why your financial year end is so important. So in that timeline, you can now make little horizontal lines. Let's say after the first 3 months, the company issued more shares. Then you make a little line there and say this happened on the 31st of March. And then the company might have declared dividends, let's say, on the 30th of June. Then on the 30th of June, you make a little line there and you say, on this day, we've declared dividends of X cents per share. All right, so that is just a useful little tool. And that becomes even more useful when you are dealing with multiple years. In most questions, we will see next week when we start with tax as well. Those questions normally cover more than one financial year. In the case of share capital, it might, but not necessarily. But in the case of tax, it'll always cover more than 1 year, financial year. In the case of foreign exchange, it'll always cover more than 1 year. So it is just a handy tool to draw a timeline. And then I'm just saying here, use your time economically. Let us go to some other pointers. It is often and normally, I can almost say always, but I'm very wary of using the word always, because always when you use the word always, something happens contrary to what you've just said. So I'd rather say more often than not, it is a good idea to read the required section first, right? Or like I've pointed out, you maybe just look at what is given first, and then you read the required section. So just look at what is given. Is it a trial balance? Is it just general ledger accounts? Is it perhaps the financial statements of the previous year? What is given? Just an overview, just a glance to see what has been provided to us, right? That is even before you actually read the rest of the question. So you don't read the question, you just see what has been given. And then after that, ladies and gentlemen, proceed to the required section. This now I'm just teaching you financial accounting and even auditing and cost accounting exam techniques, okay, if you don't already know them. So then read the required section, because that gives you a sort of an expectation of what is coming. Once you know what is coming, it very often makes the question, when you read through it, easier to interpret, because if you already know that you are going to be required to journal entries, then when you read through the question, as soon as you can see that this will result in a journal entry, you know that it is required. So you already can start perhaps jotting down on a piece of paper, this is the journal entry, roughly what is going to be required. I know that eventually I'll have to type it in, write it down in my answer sheet, or type it in my answer template, or select the appropriate option under a multiple choice question, for instance, or a multiple answer question, even where you've got not one choice but 3 or 4 or 5 choices to make. So it is a good idea to read the required section and then you start reading through the question itself, right? So that is just good exam techniques. Okay, so now let us go and have a look at the question itself. That was a long introduction. It almost takes us to our break. Don't worry, it didn't. We'll have our break at more or less past, maybe just before, maybe just after. We'll see when we have a natural little break. Okay, so now let us follow our own advice. What is our own advice? Don't read the question yet. I'm sorry. Go to what is required. Bum, 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 bum. Let us go down. What is required? Still down. Like I said, this ended up as 20 pages when I started doing inserting all these notes. Right, so what is required? 4.1, to calculate the amount to be raised by the issue of ordinary shares. This already sounds as if they are going to create a financing plan now. So that also means they are probably in the process of preparing to do either a share buyback or a redemption of redeemable preference shares. And then they carry on and they say, as described in additional information numbers 1 and 2 of the question. So we'll look through that soon. But okay, just to recap briefly, ladies and gentlemen, the Companies Act requires many things when it comes to either a share buyback or a redemption of redeemable preference shares. You know by now that it has to pass the liquidity and the solvency test before they can even start thinking about doing a buyback or a redemption, or even declaring dividends. We spoke about that, I think, last week or the week before. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the Companies Act also requires that the company must either have sufficient money, right? So they must have either sufficient money on hand to be able to fund the redemption. And if they do not have sufficient money on hand, what must they then do? They must have a plan. They must have a plan in place on how to obtain the money. So they cannot approve this redemption that we are going to be looking at unless they've passed those 2 tests that we've mentioned. They've minuted that they've done the test in the directors' meetings minutes, and then also they must either have enough funds in their own bank accounts available, and if they don't, they must have a plan to obtain sufficient funds so that the company does not bankrupt itself, so that the company doesn't end up being either insolvent or illiquid. In other words, they even become bankrupt, that is what insolvent means, or they become illiquid. It means they haven't passed the liquidity test. They cannot pay their wages and salaries at the end of the month. God forbid, that's a tragedy. Or they cannot pay their creditors at the end of the month, right? Then they are not liquid. So the Companies Act attempts to prevent that from happening if any redemption or buyback or dividend distribution takes place. Okay, so that we can see we need, well, they've already determined they haven't got enough funds, because that is why they are going to issue some additional ordinary shares in order to pay off the preference shares. That's another thing that I haven't even thought about over the weekend. So maybe I should have put a little, I've already printed it to PDF, so I can't do it now. But that is another thing, perhaps, that students must just clearly understand here, is that here we've got two classes of shares involved. We've got ordinary shares involved and we've got preference shares involved. So what happens here, they are redeeming the preference shares. In other words, they are buying them back. What happens in practice? They cancel those shares, they withdraw them from the owners, from the investors, and they refund them the money, plus any other monies that they may owe them. As you know, that redemption can take place at a premium, for instance. I'm sure Dr. Brevard discussed that with you yesterday. Also, there might be some dividends still outstanding that must be brought up to date, and so on. And in your financing plan, you might have to provide for all of that as well. The question will tell you whether you've got sufficient funds, say, for instance, for the dividends. And if you have sufficient funds for the dividends, then it means then you're not going to use your financing plan to also include your dividends, right? If you've got enough funds for dividends, then you are not going to provide for the dividends in your financing plan. But if you don't even have enough money to cover the dividends, then obviously you'll have to include the dividends that you've got to pay in your financing plan. So that's another little trick that you've got to look at. Two tricks, in fact. The one that you must remember, that you are redeeming preference shares and you are funding it, in this case, out of the issue of ordinary shares, right? In my opinion, but that doesn't matter. That's not a very clever thing to do, but it does happen sometimes. Okay, I'm not going to go into why I'm saying that's not a clever thing to do, but yeah, that's not important at this stage. Anyway, so the two things we must bear in mind: we are redeeming preference shares. In other words, we are returning the money to those investors, and one of the ways in which we get the money through our financing plan is to issue shares to our ordinary shareholders, right? So remember, the issue takes place of ordinary shares, but the redemption, or so-called buyback, takes place with regards to preference shares. And the second thing, ladies and gentlemen, just bear in mind what you must provide for. So if the company does not have sufficient money, what must you cater for? What must be included in your financing plan? Everything. In other words, the capital that you are returning to the investors, any possible premium, that additional amount that you are going to give them to reward them for initially funding the company. That premium would normally have been determined at the issue date, but it can actually be determined afterwards as well. You just cannot pay less than what they've originally invested. You cannot redeem your preference shares at a discount. That used to be possible under the old Companies Act, the 1973 Companies Act, but the 2008 Companies Act has prevented that. So a company cannot cheat their preference share investors anymore, right? They can only give them more, not less than what they've invested. And then whether the dividends that needs to be settled, that needs to be brought up to date, whether that should be included in your financing plan or not. Okay, that was quite a mouthful, but I think that points out a lot of pitfalls, some things that students sometimes struggle with. Okay, then they say refer to additional information, paragraphs 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the question, and give all the journal entries of Cocoa Limited to record. Okay, the point is, first, before we even carry on, journal entries. right? So we now know that we'll have to do some journal entries, at least for paragraph, whatever happens in paragraph 1 or whatever happened in paragraph 2 and 3 and 4 and so on, right? So journal entries. So when we read through those paragraphs soon, then we know that we can possibly jot down on a piece of paper or in our neat little notebook next to our laptop or next to our paper what that journal entry should look like, so that we can just then copy it over neatly onto our answer book, or we can type it in neatly on our answer template on the laptop or PC, right? And then which kinds of journal entries? Looks like all of them has to do with the redemption of preference share and the financing of it. So clearly we can already surmise here that this company does not have sufficient money on its own. They have to finance that redemption, so they'll have to obtain some money. So the financial accountant in conjunction with all his team of accountants in the company, they would have drawn up a financing plan, which they would then present to the financial director or the CFO, the chief financial officer, who will then table it to the board of directors for approval. Okay, ladies and gents, and then they say you don't need to provide a narrative description of what that journal entry is about, but remember the dates are always important. Then 4.3, what do they require here? Refer to additional information number 8. So we're now going to paragraph 8 in the question and give another journal entry. So we can make that roughly now already. Journal entry of Cocoa Limited to record the issue of fully paid up shares. What is another name for fully paid up shares? Let me scroll away from that. Let's see if you know, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't exercised your fingers yet this morning. What is another name for, or the official name really, for fully paid up shares? So they are issuing fully paid up shares. What kind of an issue is that? What do we call that kind of issue? It's unique. It's the only issue which is not for money. What do we call that kind of issue? Can you type that in the chat for us, please? Who's brave enough? Or you can say it like Gershwin was so brave to switch on his mic earlier. What kind of issue is fully paid up shares, also sometimes referred to as bonus shares? Yes? Should I start getting worried? Relieve me of this pain. Now I'm going to make coffee while I wait. No, we haven't got time to waste, ladies and gents. What do we call that kind of issue? It's unique because it's the only type of issue, share issue, where the company doesn't actually get money. They are actually rewarding their shareholders in lieu, in other words, in place of a dividend. So they're giving them fully paid out shares or bonus shares. It's a cap. A capitalization issue. Okay, it's a capitalization issue. Now I can scroll down again. Right, fully paid up shares are all that the official term that the Company Act uses is a capitalization issue. You'll also find that in International Accounting Standard number 32. But generally speaking, the market often talks about fully paid up shares or bonus shares, which simply means that the investor gets those shares for free. They do not have to pay for it. That's why it's sometimes referred to as fully paid up or bonus. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that is what is required. What else? 4.4, prepare the statement of changes in equity. Well, that's a no-brainer. If we are dealing with share capital, in which statement do we disclose all changes, everything that happened with our share capital during the course of the year in our statement of changes in equity? That's what the name indicates. If we issue shares, if we buy back shares, if we do a redemption of preference shares, they all represent changes of equity. They are all equities. And if we do something, we issue new shares, we redeem shares, we buy back shares. There are other things. There are things like for instance, if you are declaring a dividend, you are distributing some of your retained earnings. That also affects your statement of changes in equity. But focusing on shares itself, any movement or any transaction or event that takes place that affects your share capital is a change in equity. So this is a no-brainer. There's no surprise here. Obviously, you'll have to prepare the statement of changes in equity of the companies whose books we are working in for that year end, and it must comply with IFRS as well. That is exactly what we are teaching you, what the IFRSs require. Okay, so that we can do. And then, ladies and gentlemen, 4.5, prepare the following note to the financial statements. Once again, this should be a no-brainer. They're not going to ask the note for PPE here. They're not going to ask the accounting policies here. They're not going to ask you the statement of compliance or your basis of preparation. What are they going to ask you here? The ordinary and preference share capital notes, right? It might not be both, might just be the one or the other, but they're going to ask some sort of a share capital note. So prepare the following note to the financial statements of the company whose books we're working in for the financial year that we are dealing with, in compliance with IFRS, as we should know. Ordinary share capital note and the preference share capital note, right? Most companies will have that as one note, the note being share capital note, let's say note number 7, and then they'll have 7.1, the ordinary share capital note, and note number 2, the 10% preference share capital note, number 7.3, the 12% redeemable preference share capital note, and then 7.4. So it'll all be under that same main number, but then sub numbers 7.1, 7.2, 7.3. So let's say possibly your 8% participating preference share, whatever. For each class and for each type of share, you'll have a separate little note under the main share capital notes, right? Okay, and then we've got the solution there, right? So now let's go and do this, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, before we do that, let's have our break. It's now 28 minutes past. By the time I finish talking, it'll be 29 minutes past. So let us give ourselves 11 minutes break. So we'll commence, or we'll continue, resume with this question at 9:40. 9:40, and then we'll see how we get to the solutions. We'll obviously have to work through the question itself now, the body of the question. We know now what is required of us. We know in whose books we are working. We know what the financial year is that we're drawing financial statements up for. Now it's simply a matter of doing the journal entries, drawing up that statement of changes in equity, doing that disclosure, doing that note that relates to our various classes and types of shares. Okay, have a nice break. We'll speak in 10 and a bit minutes at 9:40. Thank you. See you soon.